And so what I want to do is, I'm not going to say one thing or another, whether people should get them, whether they shouldn't, so on and so forth. But all I want to do is break down the definition of the word, maybe throw in a couple of examples of countries and organizations that had to pay out, and or groups of people, organizations that received reparations, just to show you that it is something that has happened in the past. People have been paid reparations or been made to pay reparations, and it also falls under multiple different names. What's up, guys? Welcome to Simple Shit TV. I am your host, Alvin Holden, also known as Projekt8020, and in today's video we are going to talk about reparations, the definition of reparations. Now, you know, I've created a segment of this show called Good Faith, and this is exactly the reason why I've created this particular segment of the show, Good Faith, because the issue is so charged up with so much vitriol on both sides. It's difficult to really get any information out. And so what I want to do is, I'm not going to say one thing or another, whether people should get them, whether they shouldn't, so on and so forth. But all I want to do is break down the definition of the word, maybe throw in a couple of examples of countries and organizations that had to pay out, and or groups of people, organizations that received reparations, just to show you that it is something that has happened in the past. People have been paid reparations or been made to pay reparations, and it also falls under multiple different names. Okay, so we're gonna just shoot over here to the computer really quick, and then we're just gonna talk about it. I'll try to make this quick. This might be boring. If you're bored easily, this video is not gonna be for you. We're gonna use words today. This is a thinking man's video today. So if you're bored easily, I don't know what to tell you. We're going to talk about reparations. There's really not anything else I can say. Normally I try to keep it simple and light and whatever, but like, this is a pretty serious thing, which is why we're doing this in good faith. All right, so we're gonna try to do this piece by piece, and I'm gonna try to make this quick. What do we got? Reparations are broadly understood as compensation given for an abuse or injury. The colloquial meaning of reparations has changed substantively over the last century. In the early 1900s, reparations were interstate exchanges that were punitive mechanisms determined by treaty and paid by the surrendering side of conflict, such as the World War I reparations paid by Germany to its allies. Reparations are now understood not only as war damages, but as also compensation and other measures provided to victims of severe human rights violations by the parties responsible. The rights of the victim of an injury to receive reparations and the duty of the part responsible to provide them has been secured by the United Nations. We're going to go over the types of reparations, and we're going to go over these really quickly. Once again, I'm going to try to like hammer through these. More than anything, all I really want to do is just lay the groundwork for a larger, more substantive conversation. Restitution. Measures to which serve to restore the victim to its original situation before the gross violations occurred. This can include restoring of liberty, enjoyment of human rights, identity, family life, and citizenship, return of one's place of residence, restoration of employment, and the return of property. Damages and compensation. The provision of compensation for any economically accessible damage as appropriate and proportional to the gravity of the violation and the circumstances of each case. Such damage includes physical or mental harm, lost opportunities, material damage, and lost earnings, moral damage, cost of legal, medical, psychological, and social services. That's 2. 3. rehabilitation, medical, physiological, social services, and legal assistance. 4. Satisfaction, various measures which include the cessation of human rights violations and abuses, truth-seeking searches for the disappeared, recovery and reburial of remains, judicial and administrative sanctions, public apologies, commemoration, and memorialization, right? So these are all parts of a reparations process. Guarantees of non-repetition, forms ensuring that the prevention in future abuses, including civilian control of the military and security forces, strengthening an independent judiciary, protection of civil service and human rights workers, the overall promotion of human rights standards, and the establishment of mechanisms to prevent and monitor social conflict and conflict resolution. All right, so those are ways that reparations can be paid or addressed. Who receives reparations, right? And I'm going to hammer through this really quick, and then I'm going to give you an example. Victims of violations and international human rights or humanitarian law have the rights to prompt, sufficient, and effective reparation. Victims can be individuals or a collective group of individuals who suffered similar violations. Such victims, as defined by the UN Basic Principles on the matter, are persons who individually or collectively suffer harm, including physical or mental injury, emotional suffering, economic loss, or substantial impairment of their fundamental rights through acts or omissions that constitute gross violations of international human rights law or serious violations of international humanitarian law. The immediate family or dependents of the direct victim and persons who have suffered harm in intervening to assist victims in distress or to prevent victimization. That part's important. Who provides reparation? I guess let's get this one last one before we give you an example. The state, as the authority responsible for ensuring the protection of human rights and the administration of the justice within their borders, is correspondingly also responsible for providing redress for abuses and injustices suffered by their citizens. The UN Basic Principles also states that if a person or entity other than the state can be found liable for the violations and abuses endured, such a party is responsible for providing reparations either directly to the victim through compensating the state for reparations rendered. The international legal underpinning for the right to effective remedy and duty to provide reparation can be found in multiple human rights and humanitarian treaties and conventions, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 8, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 2, the International Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, that's Article 6, the United Nations Convention Against Torture, Article 14, the Convention on the Rights of a Child, Article 39, the Hague Conventions respecting the laws and customs of war on land, Article 3, and protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions relating to the protection of victims in the international armed conflicts. Like I said, this isn't that hard, but we're going to keep it going. We're going to keep it going. We're going to keep it going. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. Two of these because they're close. So for some of you guys that don't know, really quick, the country of Canada took away the children of the native Indians and threw them all in schools, basically to school the Indian out of them and make them good Canadians. What they didn't really tell the parents is that they didn't intend for all those kids to make it out, and they end up murdering a bunch of those kids, and a lot of those kids never saw their parents again. So let's go ahead and talk about that. There's a story there. You can look, you can Google it. Let's look it up. Let's say Canada for more than 100 years. Canada retained a practice of removing Indigenous Canadian children from their families and placing them in church-run Indian residential schools. The process was a part of an effort to homogenize Canadian society and include the prohibition of native language and cultural practices. In 1991, the Canadian government established the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, charged with exploring the relationship between Aboriginal peoples, the government, and society. As a result, the commission recommendations, the government symbolically issued an apology in the Statement of Reconciliation, admitting that the schools were designed on racist models of assimilation. Pope Benedict the 16th, somebody correct me on my Roman numerals, also issued an apology on behalf of the church members who were involved in the practice. In addition, the government provided a $350 million fund to help those affected by the schools. In 2006, the federal government signed the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, agreeing to provide reparations to the survivors of this program. The settlement totals approximately $2 billion and includes financial compensation, a truth commission, and support services. In 2017, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologized to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. Anyways, so like I was saying, for those that are just don't really feel like Googling what reparations really means, that was it. Basically, you know, not only countries, but businesses, if they had a hand in doing a group of people wrong on a large level, those people are should be compensated in a number of different ways. They should be made whole in a number of different ways. And I just outlined a bunch of those. So for those that have to, that give pushback, you know, you have to understand that immigrants come to this country on their own accord. Now, Africans at the time were brought here against their will. And not only were they brought here against their will, they were forced to work for free or nothing. And when you really dig in, you understand that this country gained its footing, gained all of its wealth, and separated itself from the rest of the world on the backs of the labor of African American people. Now, not to say that white folks didn't do anything, like they weren't out farming and so on and so forth too, but we can't deny chattel slavery, which was more barbaric, more cruel, and more outlandish than every other type of slavery across the entire world. And even though black folks aren't in chains now, you can trace back policies that are active now. You can trace them all the way back to chattel slavery, and you realize that we are not that far removed. And black folks need to be paid. They need their 40 acres and a mule that they were promised. It is what it is. So do me a favor, like, share, subscribe. I know this was a little bit dry. I try to stay a little bit, you know, a little more upbeat, but this is more than anything a kind of a supporting video for some other things that I've done recently. And for those that are confused about what reparations really are, and or want to have just kind of a breakdown of like what realistically reparations really mean, or how they go and what that whole means. This is just kind of like an entry into that world. And here on Simple Shit TV, again, we take these really big, complicated concepts and we try to boil them down to something really small. And I hope that this was a small enough bite-sized piece. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been great. I'm gonna catch you guys on the flip side. Erykah Badu said it best. I'm an artist. I'm sensitive about my shit, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.